The Finnish government has just done the unthinkable. They've officially rejected Nigeria's demand to extradite Simon Ekpa. But that's just the beginning. What seemed like an isolated legal battle has exploded into a global diplomatic firestorm. The man Nigeria calls a threat, Finland calls a political activist. The man the government once silenced. The United States Congress is now watching closely. And while all this unfolds, something even more unexpected has happened. A quiet Biafran victory was just planted on European soil legally and permanently in the heart of Norway. Now the world is asking, who is Simon Ekpa? Why does this one man thousands of miles from home strike such fear in a government's heart, yet inspire millions across continents? Is this just the rebirth of a political movement or the beginning of a new nation rising from the ashes of war and oppression? And how did a tweet Simon made before his arrest come true? Word for word. Buckle up because what you're about to discover will challenge history, expose hypocrisy, and reveal a revolution the world can no longer ignore. The Finnish government has officially refused the Nigerian federal government's request to extradite Simon Ekpa. Despite earlier rumors and witness statements in Nigerian courts, Finland confirmed there is no plan or legal basis to send Simon Ekpa to Nigeria and that his ongoing trial in Finland will continue based on their legal system. The United States of BIAFRA, USB, successfully opened and registered a mission house in Norway under the Norwegian Brønnøysund Register Center, marking a significant diplomatic achievement. The house is legally recognized as a non-profit interest organization and represents USB's expanding international presence. A tweet made by Simon Ekpa on November 15, 2024, just days before his arrest, appears to have come true, further fueling his supporters' belief in his foresight and strengthening public support for his cause. AI tool named Grok, which was invented by Elon Musk, has listed the Igbo ethnic group as the sixth most economically impactful ethnic group globally via memes and trade without government aid, making them the highest-ranked African group. This sparked celebration among Igbos worldwide. A petition submitted to the U.S. Congress regarding Simon Ekpa's treatment by Finland and Nigeria has been officially adopted, giving Simon Ekpa a diplomatic win in America and increasing international scrutiny of his detention and trial. The story begins with a problem that runs much deeper than a simple extradition request or legal misunderstanding. It's a problem rooted in history, one that stretches back over 5 decades with wounds that never healed. It starts with the marginalization of a people, the Biafran people, mostly of the Igbo ethnic group. Since the end of the Biafran War in 1970, the Nigerian state has never truly reconciled with its eastern population. Instead, cycles of violence, exclusion, and systemic economic sabotage have become the everyday reality of the Igbo people. This particular chapter in the struggle opened with an urgent diplomatic demand from the Nigerian government to Finland. They wanted Simon Ekpa, the most outspoken and strategic Biafran leader in exile, extradited to Nigeria. Abuja accused him of inciting unrest, funding separatism, and destabilizing Nigeria from abroad. To many within the Nigerian ruling class, Ekpa represents an existential threat. But to Biafrans and other oppressed ethnic nationalities in the country, Simon is a liberator, a voice of justice, a shield for the vulnerable. However, the Finnish government's response was not what President Tinubu and his handlers expected. Finland, in clear and strong diplomatic language, rejected the extradition request. According to Helsinki, there was no legal basis to surrender Simon Ekpa to the Nigerian government. The Finnish authorities emphasize that their laws, which uphold press freedom, self-determination, and the right to political asylum, do not permit such actions unless strict evidence of criminal wrongdoing exists, and none had been presented.
What?
Nigeria labeled terrorism. Finland saw as political activism. The reason this extradition attempt failed lies not just in legal technicalities, but also in the glaring contradictions of Nigeria's own justice system. Simon Ekpa, despite being outside Nigeria, had faced court trials inside Nigeria without any real due process or presence. Witnesses were coerced and fabricated testimonies were produced with no transparent legal foundation. A nation that suppresses peaceful protesters, shoots at unarmed demonstrators during SARS protests, and deploys its army to massacre civilians in the southeast, simply does not have the moral grounds to seek justice elsewhere. The Finnish snub of Tinubu's request was a diplomatic embarrassment for Nigeria and a powerful vindication for the Biafran cause. It was also a resounding moral victory for Simon Ekpa, who has always maintained that his advocacy for BIAFRA is rooted in international law and democratic principles. Then came a second blow to Nigeria's narrative. While Tinubu was hoping for international backing in silencing Simon Ekpa, the United States of BIAFRA made a historic diplomatic breakthrough. A mission house was successfully opened and registered in Norway. Officially recognized by the Brno Register Center as a non-profit interest organization. This move was not just symbolic, it was legally binding, permanent, and official. The opening of this office marked a turning point in the global Biafran movement, showing that the vision for an independent BIAFRA was not just a social media dream, but a serious diplomatic campaign backed by law. The USB Mission House in Norway is now tasked with coordinating Biafran interests across Scandinavia, monitoring the treatment of Biafrans in exile, and engaging with foreign governments. It's a safe space, a legal entity, and a voice for the voiceless. The registration of the Mission House has made Norway the second European country after Finland to offer a legal platform for Biafran activism. It confirmed to the world that this movement is not a fleeting tantrum. It is a structured liberation effort. What made things even more spiritually compelling for many was a tweet that Simon Ekpa made on November 15, 2024. In it, he confidently predicted that events were about to shift in his favor and that the nations of the world would soon hear the cries of the Biafran people. That tweet came just days before he was arrested in Finland. At the time, it seemed like empty bravado. But now, after Finland's rejection of his extradition, the opening of the USB Norway office, and the diplomatic interest his case is drawing, that tweet is being hailed by his followers as prophecy fulfilled. It has further cemented Simon's reputation as a divinely inspired leader, not just a political strategist. Meanwhile, a revelation from a surprising source added fuel to the growing Biafran momentum. An AI tool known as Grok, created by Elon Musk, released a global ranking that shook the internet. According to Grok's data analysis, the Igbo ethnic group is the sixth most economically impactful group in the world. What made the announcement stunning wasn't just the rank. It was the fact that the Igbo did this with little to no help from their government. Despite being structurally excluded from national leadership and heavily targeted in federal economic policies, the Igbo people through small and medium-sized enterprises have become one of the engines of global commerce. In Africa, they ranked the highest. That report triggered widespread celebration in Igbo communities across the globe. But it also raised critical questions. How could a group so powerful economically continue to be treated as second-class citizens in their own country? How could the same Nigerian government that relies on Igbo taxes and commerce turn around and send tanks into their villages? This contradiction is at the heart of the Biafran question. The final wave of events came from the United States. After months of advocacy, a petition regarding the treatment of Simon Ekpa by both Nigeria and Finland was officially adopted by the U.S. Congress. The petition raised alarm over the alleged political persecution of Simon, pointing to multiple violations of his rights and the weaponization of diplomacy to silence dissent. With the adoption of this petition, Simon Ekpa scored another major diplomatic win. American lawmakers are now officially watching the case, and the international scrutiny surrounding his detention and trial in Finland has increased. The consequences of these victories are massive. First, Simon Ekpa's global legitimacy has skyrocketed. He is no longer seen as just a firebrand activist in exile. He is now treated as a political leader with international recognition. Secondly, the Biafran movement has gained tangible momentum with registered offices, international media coverage, and legal wins in Europe and America. It has moved beyond hashtags and into the halls of global diplomacy. More importantly, these developments have exposed the historical and ongoing injustices against the Igbo people. Since 1966, the Nigerian state has treated Biafrans as a conquered people. The massacres of Igbo civilians in the north in the 1960s, the starvation strategy during the Civil War that led to the deaths of over 3 million Biafrans, and the repeated military invasions of peaceful towns like Onaka, Arba, and Niue are just a few of the documented atrocities. Even today, men and women are abducted by Nigerian soldiers in Imo, Anambra, and AIA only to disappear without trial or trace. The international community has largely remained silent until now, with Finland, Norway, and now the US Congress taking steps toward acknowledgement. BIAFRA is beginning to re-enter the world stage, not as a forgotten memory, but as a modern self-determination movement backed by law and diplomacy. Still, challenges remain. Nigeria, despite its international embarrassment, is unlikely to back down easily. President Bola Tinubu's administration continues to militarize the southeast. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have documented over 100 cases of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, and torture in Biafran regions since 2021. Entire families have been wiped out in midnight raids. The press in Nigeria is heavily censored, and many who report on Biafra risk imprisonment or worse. Yet amidst this darkness, there is light. The Biafran people, fueled by these recent wins, have redoubled their commitment. In towns and cities, even in secret gatherings, ordinary people speak of Biafra with hope, not fear. They see Simon Ekpa as the bridge between the sacrifice of Nnamdi Kanu and the promised freedom. Where Nnamdi laid the foundation and paid dearly with imprisonment, Simon now builds with diplomacy, legal expertise, and international outreach. The journey is far from over. The road to a fully recognized independent Biafran state will be long, hard, and possibly painful. But thanks to this turning point, Finland's rejection of extradition, Norway's recognition of a mission house, America's legislative engagement, and the economic praise from AI tools like Grok, the journey has gained a new and unstoppable momentum. In the end, what provoked this story isn't just Nigeria's desperation or Simon's resilience. It is the timeless yearning of a people to breathe free, a people who have bled, been mocked, hunted, and neglected, but who still stand, and who now more than ever are being seen and heard. The winds of change blowing from Scandinavia across the Atlantic and down into the deeply wounded but defiant southeastern lands of Nigeria are not ordinary. They are winds stirred by truth, fueled by history, and carried on the wings of justice long denied. As the story of Seaman Yoka Ekpa unfolds in global headlines, it becomes evident that his triumph is not merely about avoiding extradition or opening an office in Norway. It is about the resurrection of a people's voice long silenced by bullets, propaganda, and economic strangulation. After Finland's diplomatic rejection of Nigeria's request, something shifted not only in the political air, but in the hearts of millions of Biafrans both at home and abroad. In cities like Enugu, Arba, Ori, and even as far as London, Johannesburg, Houston, and Toronto, a collective sigh of relief turned into spontaneous celebration. The Biafrans had waited months in fear, afraid that Finland might bow to Nigerian pressure, that Simon would be handed over in the dead of night. But that didn't happen. And that single act of defiance by a sovereign European nation reignited faith across the Biafran world. It was not only a legal victory, it was a psychological one. For decades, the Nigerian government has operated under the belief that the international community would always stand aside. Whether it was during the horrific killings of Biafran youths at Ekpa in 2016 or the massacre at Afra Uku during the military invasion of Nnamdi Kanu's family home in 2017 or the mass graves uncovered in Olu after multiple military bombardments in 2021. There was silence. No nation dared to call Nigeria to account. But this time with Simon Ekpa's case, Finland broke that silence. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration did not expect this outcome. Since assuming power, Tinubu had positioned himself as a firm nationalist, claiming to represent all Nigerians while disproportionately unleashing security operations in the southeast. In truth, his administration, like those before it, continued the policy of treating the Igbo and other Easterners as enemies of the state. Infrastructure projects are abandoned midway in the region. Federal appointments exclude Igbo professionals. The roads are left in disrepair. And worst of all, The military presence is suffocating, with checkpoints turning into death traps for young men suspected of supporting IPOB or the Biafran cause. So when Simon Ekpa, broadcasting from Finland, began coordinating civil resistance campaigns like sit-at-home protests, the Nigerian government reacted with rage. They accused him of orchestrating violence, of creating instability, of destroying Nigeria's image abroad. But what they failed to acknowledge was the reason behind the protests, that they were a cry of survival in a land where expressing Biafran identity can get you imprisoned or killed. Simon, unlike many activists before him, combined grassroots influence with legal knowledge and a powerful online presence. He wasn't merely shouting slogans.
He was documenting
atrocities, challenging misinformation, and appealing to global institutions. That made him dangerous to Abuja. So they tried to silence him, but Finland said no. Meanwhile, in Norway, a quiet but powerful move was taking place. The United States of BIAFRA's newly opened mission house in Oslo began registering Biafran nationals living in the region. They started offering legal advice to asylum seekers, organizing events to educate Norwegians about Biafra's history, and building partnerships with human rights organizations. What was once seen as an online dream became brick-and-mortar reality. When the news of this achievement broke, reactions in Nigeria were mixed. But the shock in Aso Rock was palpable. For the first time in decades, an unrecognized nation had achieved diplomatic footholds, not through war, but through law. For the Nigerian state, which often uses diplomatic channels to block or frustrate the Biafran cause, this was an alarming development. The deeper meaning of the mission house was that BIAFRA was moving from resistance to governance, from protest to structure. It signified readiness. This readiness frightened Nigerian authorities because it proved that the Biafran struggle was no longer just emotional. It was strategic. Music, and then came the bombshell from across the ocean. The U.S. Congress officially adopted the petition filed by Biafran American organizations detailing the human rights abuses against Simon Ekpa and the wider Biafran community. The petition also accused both Finland and Nigeria of attempting to politically persecute Simon through extradition tactics and media disinformation. That moment was historic. The United States, for the first time in a formal legislative space, was asked to investigate the persecution of Biafrans. Simon supporters in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta held press conferences. Biafran flags were waved near the Capitol. Lawyers began drafting follow-up reports for U.S. lawmakers. Nigerian diplomatic officials tried to downplay the development. But behind closed doors, the concern was real. It is not just about Simon anymore. It is about the opening of wounds that Nigeria had long buried beneath layers of denial. It is about the possibility of international courts revisiting the war crimes of 1967 to 1970. It is about the tens of thousands of people who disappeared from detention facilities in AIA, Anambra, and Ebonyi over the last 2 decades. It is about the families whose sons never came back after a military patrol stopped them on their way home. The AI revelation from Grok, a tool built by Elon Musk's engineers, came like an affirmation from the universe. For many years, Biafrans have claimed they were among the most industrious people on the continent. Now, hard data from one of the world's most advanced platforms confirmed it. Igbo people, despite persecution, contribute significantly to global trade and enterprise. Grok placed them 6th in the world, ahead of many dominant global communities and the top group in Africa. That information exploded across the internet. It became a source of pride, but also of clarity. It begged the question, why are the most economically impactful people in Nigeria treated as if they are criminals in their own homeland? The answer, though painful, is found in Nigeria's post-war policies. After the civil war ended in 1970, the government promised reconciliation, but instead they implemented the infamous 20 policy, whereby all Igbos, regardless of how much they had in the bank before the war, were only given 20 upon rejoining Nigeria. Their properties were seized, their homes were looted, their businesses were shut down. And then came years of neglect, suspicion, and ethnic profiling. Despite all that, Biafrans rebuilt. They built markets, transport systems, tech startups, import-export businesses. Today, Igbo businessmen and women dominate the auto spare parts sector, the electronics markets, and much of the logistics space across West Africa. Yet, they're still harassed by police on the roads, still denied leadership roles, still watched as if they are enemies of the Federation. In Simon Eker's voice, many now hear the echo of past heroes. Chukwemeka Odiu Megu Ojukwu Nnamdi Azikiwe, and more recently Nnamdi Kanu's message, is consistent that Biafrans deserve self-governance, respect, and protection, that Nigeria's foundation has failed, and that it's time for an exit that allows peace to reign for the international community. This moment offers a chance to correct decades of silence. The same countries that armed Nigeria during the Biafran War and turned away from starving children now have a chance to hear the voices of a new generation, not with guns, but with petitions, registration documents, and peaceful protests. As for the future, hope remains guarded. There is a real danger that Nigeria might double down. The government may choose to launch more military operations in the east. It may target relatives of activists. It may try to block foreign embassies from engaging with Biafran representatives. But these tactics, as history shows, only inflame resistance. The better path is one of dialogue, of truth and reconciliation, of justice, not vengeance. If Nigeria can recognize the nationhood of others like Palestine, like Western Sahara, it must begin to accept that Biafrans too have a right to seek their destiny. That right is enshrined in the African Charter, the United Nations Charter, and even in Nigeria's own constitution. Simon Eker's victory is not final, but it is foundational. Yet, they are still harassed by police on the roads, still denied leadership roles, still watched as if they are enemies of the Federation. In Simon Eker's voice, many now hear the echo of past heroes. Chukwemeka Odiu Megu Ojukwu Nnamdi Azikiwe, and more recently Nnamdi Kanu's message, is consistent that Biafrans deserve self-governance, respect, and protection, that Nigeria's foundation has failed, and that it's time for an exit that allows peace to reign for the international community. This moment offers a chance to correct decades of silence. The same countries that armed Nigeria during the Biafran War and turned away from starving children now have a chance to hear the voices of a new generation, not with guns, but with petitions, registration documents, and peaceful protests. As for the future, hope remains guarded. There is a real danger that Nigeria might double down. The government may choose to launch more military operations in the east. It may target relatives of activists. It may try to block foreign embassies from engaging with Biafran representatives. But these tactics, as history shows, only inflame resistance. The better path is one of dialogue, of truth and reconciliation, of justice, not vengeance. If Nigeria can recognize the nationhood of others like Palestine, like Western Sahara, it must begin to accept that Biafrans too have a right to seek their destiny. That right is enshrined in the African Charter, the United Nations Charter, and even in Nigeria's own constitution. Simon Eker's victory is not final, but it is foundational. He has brought legitimacy to the Biafran dream. He has forced the world to look again at a forgotten people. He has opened doors that military might could never break down. And in doing so, he has become a symbol not just of defiance, but of what is possible when justice is pursued with discipline and vision. Whether in the hills of Abakaliki, the streets of Onitsha, the markets of Aba, or the snow-covered roads of Helsinki and Oslo, the cry is the same. We are Biafrans. We are not terrorists. We are not second-class citizens. We are a people and we are rising. And that perhaps is the most powerful truth the world must now reckon with.